hold. So far, it looks like it is, which is a first. I've been doing this for a week and a half now, and it has yet to hold solid. So I'm very thankful for that. No crashes yet. You know, you can video call me at brooksgibbslive.com. I've been doing a brand new video call-in show, kind of like your traditional radio call-in show. You see Dr. Laura doing, Dave Ramsey doing, and a bunch of other people that just are, you know, people throw at them situational ethics, and the radio personality kind of communicates back the best advice they can give. And it's not always great, it's not always in depth, but people seem to like it. And as a kid, I always grew up listening to call-in talk shows, and I felt like I grew in wisdom. And I just love the challenging questions that I receive from people who write in, and I'll read a few who have written into me recently, but especially those who call in and are willing to show their mug on international web video. I want to welcome you to my show. brooksgibbslive.com is the website you go to, and you will be connected with me via video call. Incredible. If you're using an iPhone, you will have to download an app, but it'll show you how to do that when you go to that website, brooksgibbslive.com. How are you guys doing? It's been a long time in quarantine. If you would have told me a month ago that all schools would have been shut down, all my speaking engagements would have been canceled, businesses would have been closed, over 10 million people would apply for unemployment. If you would have told me that the entire global population would be in pandemic mode, I wouldn't have believed you. I would have said, man, you're talking like end time stuff. What could possibly do that? And to think a tiny little virus, COVID-19, well known as a coronavirus, a little tiny guy, microscopic, can single-handedly crush the entire global economic spectrum. It is tragic, and kids are getting a front row seat to how reality sometimes throws you a curveball. And we cannot change reality. We must learn to adjust to it. Can I talk about that for a second while I'm waiting for your call? brooksgibbslive.com is how you can call into my video studio. Oh, by the way, this is a painting behind me that my 13-year-old son Braden did. Here's a better shot of it. Corner shot in my virtual office here. Where is it? Oh, there it is. It's a wonderful painting. Hey, buddy, what do you call the painting? Braden? He's watching me do the show. Braden! What do you call the painting? Do you call it anything?
I don't call it.
You've got a moon reflecting on the water.
It's just a bunch of painting.
You've got the sun reflecting on the water, which is awesome. I love it, buddy.
You can call it reflection.
Reflections, that's what he calls it, reflections. And if you want your copy of Reflections, too bad, just screenshot my little show. But I want to go back while I'm waiting on your call, brooksgibbslive.com. I want to talk about adjusting to reality. You know, a good definition of mental illness is demanding that reality adjusts to your demands. I'll say that again. A good sidearm, non-clinical definition of mental illness is demanding reality adjusts to your demands. People go crazy when they have demands about reality, about life, about what's happening, and they cannot make it stop. They cannot make it change. I call it giving up the grip. You have to give up the grip and adjust to reality. Or as the Chinese say, be water. I really like the Chinese way of thinking. I've read quite a bit on it. And they have learned to adjust to reality and therefore influence future realities. So let's take the coronavirus, for example. It is here. And the governments and the powers that be have implemented executive orders. It is as if we are living in a police state. It is unthinkable, unfathomable. Some of the older folks that I've been talking to, they've never seen anything like this in their lifetime. It is truly tragic because the economics, horizon, it looks bleak. People's wealth have vaporized because of the stock market crash. And if they sell their home to try to feed their family, to leverage the equity they have, their equity has been sucked out. Much of it has. And it's not very much a buying market at all. It's not a seller's market, that's certainly for sure. And so it will eventually become a buyer's market, meaning that those that are selling the home won't be able to get as much as they hoped they would. And then where do they go? Rent's going to go up. As you know, whenever the economy crashes, rent increases. So it's a real challenge. It's a real challenge for people right now. So what does wisdom say? What do wisdom folks do? Well, they adjust to reality. And they look for the good in the bad. They look for the upside to the let down. And when we train our brain to be positive and not negative, to adjust to this reality. For example, I've gone online. I can't travel in an airplane really and go to schools. They're all closed. So I have to do my work online. My neighbor down the street lost his job. He's in the restaurant business, so he's pivoting and looking for new industries. It's going to be a season of suffering. But like all seasons, seasons have ends. I'd love to hear how you're doing at home with your kiddos, answer your questions if you have them, or just hear your comments. Maybe you're on a coronacation and you've stashed away cash and you're doing just fine and now you're enjoying the family and you feel like this is the best gift of all. Well, good for you. I want to hear about that. I'm Brooks Gibbs, and you can call me right here in the studio at brooksgibbslive.com. You know, last week I had a call from a kid named Boots, actually his mom, and they didn't really, he barely talked to me. But maybe he'll talk to me this time. I'm not sure. Let me chat with his mom here. Tell me your name again. What's your name? I forget.
Sarah.
Hi, Sarah. Thanks for calling me. How are you?
Good. I'm doing
Good.
okay. Yeah. I don't know if Boots will talk today or not. But yeah, we're doing okay here, and yeah, I enjoyed your talk a little bit. I may be going to. I work in the medical field, and I may be going to travel to work in a corona unit soon. So.
Oh my.
So that might be some changes here in our family. Yep.
Which, what will that mean, first of all, from a pay perspective? Is it the same pay, or is there like hazard pay as well?
There's some hazard pay.
And when it comes to family life, do you have to live somewhere else, or are you able to live at home still as long as you're taking precautions at work?
No, I'll have to travel. We're in Western Colorado, and we really don't have a lot of cases yet. So I'm looking at a job in Atlanta. And so you have to go to where all the cases are. So.
I understand. Who's going to hold down the fort? Are you married?
Yes. Yeah. So my husband will be here. He's starting a new business though, so.
Oh my.
So he'll be there during the day, and then the kids, he'll be here. So.
Well, it's amazing. You didn't think 2020 would look like this, did you?
No, we had no idea. And yeah, I'm in anesthesia, and we have no work right now. So the only place I can work is to go and do that, to make money, to be able to support the family. So I never thought it never happened. Yeah. So
I'm sorry for interrupting. My doctor friends have said the same thing. They're like, man, we cleared out the hospital and stopped the surgeries so that we can make available for the rush, and there is none, so we're all bored.
Yeah. So, and some people have the pay from the hospital, but everybody's got a different situation. So.
Right. Well, does Boots want to chat with me?
Boots, you want to say hi?
Hi.
Here, will you hand me my phone? Okay. We'll see.
I love this live show. Everyone's
I
looking
know,
like,
it's
can you
fun.
turn down the audio? I'm hearing a slap back.
Sure.
Did you need to
How
get
about
that call?
Is that better? What's
fine.
that?
Did you need to get that call?
Okay. I can call it back.
Okay.
So I don't know if he'll talk today or not, but I could say hi, and it's good to see you
cool.
again. And
Good. See, I love
thanks
that.
for your.
Moms, the wise moms, just like wise wives, don't force dudes to do anything. They just present the opportunity, and make it available. And wise would be the son or husband to heed the counsel of the mom or wife. Is there anything that maybe he could hear me talk about for a second? If he did have a question for me, do you know what it might be?
Yeah, it's hard to say.
Last time it was communication.
It was, and which I was the listening thing, which surprised me a little bit. I probably listened to him more than anybody outside his brother. They're very close, so. But I don't know. Yeah, he has an older brother too that I told about your broadcast, and they both love your videos. So,
Awesome.
I don't know. I'll just keep tuning in, and I don't want to take up time from other folks too. So.
No, you're good. Well, thank you for calling in. Thank you for saying hi, and keep following me. And I wish you the absolute safest, best experience in this horrible situation. You're one of the frontline heroes.
Thank you.
So my hat tip to you.
Yeah. I'll take your prayers. And,
well, let's pray for you now then. Okay, I'll pray for you now.
Okay.
And what's your first name?
Sarah.
Sarah, that's right. So God, I pray for Sarah. I pray that you keep her healthy. I pray that you keep her family whole and complete. And I pray that you give her safe travels. I pray for work for both her husband as he starts a new job and her as she seeks work. I pray that your favor would go with them. I pray for Boots and his brother, that they would be respectful and kind to each other, and that this would be good for the soul, as most challenges are when we hit them head on with a good attitude. So we pray in your holy, precious name. Amen. Amen. I like praying for people. Thanks for that.
Thank you.
All right, sis. See ya. So you guys can call me too, as you know. You can simply give me a video call at brooksgibbslive.com. I'll put the lower third there. I want to read something from a mom that came in this morning. Her name's Susie. She said, Brooks, I need a little help working out with how to respond to my 11-year-old son when he feels wronged. He can go from super happy playing with us or siblings and then straight to a meltdown if he thinks something or someone went against him. You guys got kids like that where they go really up? They got high highs and then, man, razor sharp turn to low lows. I've got one of those boys, by the way. He says, for example, we played bingo over Zoom with cousins, and he realized I had muted him from his room. You know, you can do that on Zoom. You could actually mute everybody just to keep the chaos at a minimum. He said, my son assumed I only muted him, but when in fact I muted everybody so that I could call the bingo cards. Well, needless to say, he was devastated. He felt isolated, and he felt rejected. He felt humiliated. Are there any pointers on how not to flip out myself trying to explain to him that he is in the wrong? I wasn't against him. Thank you. I'm feeling really deflated right now. And what is my son's response? He says, quote, I hate everybody and everything. Well, I did write to this mom, and I said, Susie, your child has a human problem. It's not a parenting problem. The best parents in the world have kids who have ups and downs. And there's nothing you did to create a bipolar maniac. He's not that. He's simply not knowing how to regulate his emotions, and he has mischaracterized you, so he owes you an apology. He's assumed something that's happened when it really hasn't. And so there needs to be a conversation of the facts, and second, an investigation on what triggered his manic episode. So when do you do that? Well, not when they're in manic mode, dude. If they're freaking out saying, I hate everybody, I hate life, I hate the game, I hate everything, you just send them to their room. And you say, you're welcome to come out when you stop drinking the haterade that you're pouring for yourself. You're welcome to come out when you're kind and calm and we could have a reasonable conversation. I don't want you to be in your room, but I have to isolate you in your room now. You've done that to yourself because you're not speaking respectful. Now, the younger they are, the easier it is to control this. The older they are, the more difficult it is. So what I've discovered that if I allow my son to calm down, for me, I got 2 boys, it's not too long before he comes out with, I'm sorry. He's 10 years old. I'm sorry. In fact, I called it on my wife the other day. I said, he's just going to come out in about 1 minute and say, I'm sorry. Sure enough, he came down. And I say, not, I forgive you, but you're forgiven. This is a nuance that is critical for me, because I have what's called unconditional love for this child. And when he was born and he came into my life, I have already forgiven him for all the mistakes that he was going to do in the future. I'm not going to have a reward-based relationship with my son. I'm not going to have my conditional relationship be dictated by mistakes and successes or punishments and rewards. No, I have an unconditional relationship with him. So when he says, I'm sorry, I'm saying, you're forgiven. You know your place. You know the state of your place, or the state of mind that I have for you. Forgiven. I have more forgiveness than you have mistakes. I love you unconditionally. No matter what you do, you are forgiven. That's what God does for me. He forgives me. He's got, where sin abounds, grace much more abounds. So when I reflect the heart of God to my child, that gives that unconditional self-acceptance that is so critical for him to trust me. Okay, now I want to talk about the facts. Dude, bro, love you. But come on. I muted everyone. You didn't even know that. I muted everybody. I had to keep the whole room quiet. It wasn't just you that I muted. It was everybody. And so when you assumed wrongly that I isolated you, you were wrong. And you really owe me an apology because you mischaracterized me. So that's the first I'm sorry. But the second I'm sorry is that you blew up afterwards against me, and it's not okay. You cannot behave that way towards your parent. So let me hear you say, I'm sorry for mischaracterizing you, and I'm sorry for blowing up in anger and saying I hate life. All right, so once that's dealt, we're good. Now we talk about what triggered it. Remember, I started the program today saying mental illness is demanding reality adjust to your demands. Well, mental health on the flip side is adjusting to reality, like I kind of hinted at. The Chinese have this philosophy that I adjust to reality. So he has a demand. Where there's demand, there's disturbance. And where there's disturbance, there's demand. And when you see your child disturbed, you have to find the demand. It's in their belief system. And his demand in this case, Susie, was you must not humiliate me in front of these people. So there is a demand that you must not humiliate me. Why? Because there's another demand. There's actually 2. I must receive approval from important people, like my family on this call, my cousins. And the third demand is, and I must be perfect, or I must perform well. Those are the 3 things at play that I see reading this request. I must perform well. There's perfectionism in this child. He cannot let anyone see that he has a flaw, or he made a mistake, or that someone shut him down. And number 2, I must receive approval from important people. That's why he's such a perfectionist, because he desires approval. And he believes that through perfection, he'll get approval. And when he gets approval, it's a dual sickness that's in all of us, because he's human. We all have to fight this. And then the third thing is, you must not humiliate me in front of people, because my goal is that I must be perfect and receive approval. And so I could go on and on. I've got a whole 8-hour series on the irrational demands that I've learned from Dr. Albert Ellis from Rational Motive Behavioral Therapy. But when we cure our children of their demands, and we do that by converting them into desires, honey, instead of saying, I must not make a mistake and I must not get rejected by others, can you just say, I would like to be approved by others? Instead of I demand to be approved by others, I would like to be approved by others. It was nice. Just switching from the demand. Because if you just desired it, you'd be bummed. Oh, man. But you weren't bummed. You were lit. You were livid. You were insane in the membrane. You were angry. And because you were angry, it tells me that you have a demand. Remember, demand and disturbance are conjoined twins. And desire and disappointment are conjoined twins. So when you're disappointed, you just had a desire. But when you're disturbed, you had a demand. So let's just take your demand and make it a desire. I prefer not to be rejected, and I prefer to do really well and perform well. But I'm not perfect, and not everyone's going to like me, want to be my friends. I think the first step to helping your child in the areas where they go crazy is converting their demands into desires. Ultimately, you want to convert those desires into indifference. I don't care if people approve me or not. I don't care if I perform perfectly or not. And I don't care if you humiliate. That's indifference. And better yet, the greatest form of resilience is when you see yourself as advantageous when you make a flaw or make a mistake. Oh, great, now I can learn from what I did wrong. Or when you feel advantageous when you're rejected. Okay, now I know how people play the game. I guess I don't have to play with them anymore. We have to help our children think differently, because remember, their feelings have bosses and it's their thoughts. If you want to call me and ask me questions or give me a comment how you're doing with your coronation, my goodness, will this ever end? It will. You can simply call me at brooksgibbslive.com. This morning, I also received a message from a 15-year-old girl named Carla. This is a really sad note. I noticed. She said, "Hi, I'm 15. My name is Carla. I've been bullied since I was in the first grade for talking different." She says, "I'm tongue-tied," so she has a speech impediment. "And so it's hard for me to spell and pronounce words or sounds. This year, people told me to die in a hole. And they told me that nobody cared. I would tell kids," she has scars from cutting herself. She says, "I would tell kids about it and people said no one cared that I was cutting." And then she said, after people said that they didn't care that I was cutting or that I was having problems, she started to cut daily. And then she soon tried to kill herself. She went to a mental hospital. They told her that she had chronic depression and ADHD. And after they told me that, she said, I was sent to a mental health hospital for 2 weeks. And I stopped cutting and I started listening to you on YouTube. And I don't know what to do about these people. So sorry to bother you, Carla. Carla, you're not bothering me. I am honored that you shared your heart, your bleeding heart with me. And I know what it's like wanting to cut yourself and burn yourself. I often show kids my scars on my wrist from those miserable middle school years of burning myself and trying to cause pain. You know why people cut, by the way? Kids cut because they're trying to have an internal locus of control. Going back to reality, they realize they can't change reality around them. That's called an external locus of control. And actually, reality is so dominant in their life that reality is controlling them. And they feel so personally out of control because these external forces are taking control that kids often cut. Why? Because when you can control your own personal pain, the research tells us that there's a satisfaction that comes. It's known as a jogger's high. This rush of endorphins that fills the brain at the moment of cutting. It's a very sad coping technique. It's not deadly, though, and this is where a lot of parents freak out. Oh no, my kid's cutting. Oh my gosh, they're going to die. No. It's the opposite. They're actually trying to live. That's why every cutter I meet at the end of my school assemblies, they come up to me, they show me their scars, and I give them a big hug. I said, I'm so proud of you for hanging on to life. You know, this is just not the best coping skill for you. All it is a natural drug. It's kickstarting their own neurological endorphins to feel in control and to feel a feeling of euphoria. And there is a biopsycho I think they call it psychosomatic mind-body connection to cutting. So anyways, here's what I have to say to Carla. I say, my dear, not everyone's going to like you, you know, not everyone's going to want to be your friend. You've discovered that really quick. And it's not that people don't care that you're suffering. It's just that most people only care about themselves. And there are a few people in your life that do care. That's why you're in a hospital. Someone who cared for you sent you to that hospital. And not just that. They're giving you a digital device because they love you and care about you and want to be in communication to you. And not only that, but they pay that bill for you to be in communication with them. And they want you to be entertained, and they've encouraged you to find YouTube videos like mine that teach you how to regulate emotions and resolve social conflicts. So people do care about you, Carla. It's just that those people don't. And when those people show that they don't care for you, it's time to adjust to reality. Those are not your friends. They don't have to be your friends. They must not. Right now you're saying they must respect me. They must care. Give up the grip, girl. They don't have to do anything. There's no law that says they have to care about you. In fact, they're incredibly self-absorbed. And in a sense, they're kind of showing that they're heartless. So they're not your people. You have people. And you need to not take their rejection to heart. Well, how do I do that? Well, by changing your expectations. If you go to school every day, which now you can't, but if you interact with these folks in the neighborhood or online with the expectation that they're going to reject you, in other words, you lower your expectations for them to be respectful, and you actually expect them to be jerks. So if you're interacting with them and they're jerks, you're not disappointed, you're not devastated, you're not surprised. In fact, you're like, yes, I knew it, I called it, I knew they were going to be that way. But right now, you're interacting with these people in your life with, please, 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 please care about me. Or you must care about me. You must be kind. It's giving up the grip. Give up that grip of demands. Get rid and purge yourself of even that desire for their approval. And rather expect their rejection and reward yourself when they do reject you. Don't punish yourself when they reject you. Reward yourself when they reject you. Well, how would I do that? Reward yourself with, I would say, positive self-affirmations. Look at that, Carla. You're being wise, you would say to yourself. You're wise. You're starting to discern how people are. You're starting to adjust to their own personalities. You're getting wiser. You're getting smarter. You're social savvy. You're super smart. Reward yourself that way. Or reward yourself by buying the shoes and eating the cookie or whatever the heck you do to reward yourself. I encourage you to do so. Reward resilience. And the same biopsycho or psychosomatic body, mind, or emotional state and cognitive thinking state, how they're all intertwined, that will start conditioning your mind into wanting to be resilient because you're rewarding resilience in your own self. So I'm very proud of you. You have been given the label ADHD. And I understand, there's different signs or little tics that make someone ADHD when they do the psychological assessment. Here's one. Number one, you may have self-focused behavior. You're self-absorbed. Interesting. That's a sign of ADHD. Number two, you interrupt people. Instead of letting them finish their sentences, you interrupt. And you want to talk probably about yourself. Number three, you have trouble waiting your turn. You want it now. You've got very much impulses. Number four, you have emotional turmoil. You take things to heart, you stew on them, you're so internalizing that you're in emotional turmoil. And so your outbursts of anger and your devastating episodes really take you for a downward spiral. Number five, you fidget a lot. Maybe you're always moving your toes when you're laying down for a nap, or you're just moving your fingers. You got to keep busy. If you have a hard time being quiet, you've got to have noise on, or you have to make noise. You have unfinished tasks. You start stuff, but you don't finish them. That's when you know you have ADHD, potentially. It needs to be diagnosed by a professional, but these are just signs. You have unfinished tasks. This is what the psychiatrists look for. You have a lack of focus. That's number 8. You have a hard time focusing on one thing. Now, from what I understand in my study of ADHD, which is the same thing as attention deficit disorder, ADD, ADHD, they're all merged into the same thing. It's not that you think fast, it's actually that you think slow. And so because you think so slowly, you lose interest in the thing that you're trying to process, so you have to move over to something else. That's interesting. Number 9, you avoidance of tasks needing extended mental effort. So anything that's going to take mental toughness or stick-to-itiveness, you just try to avoid because you don't want to have anything to do with it. The number 10 is you make a lot of mistakes because you're not listening to instructions fully. You end up making mistakes and doing stuff wrong. And that is sort of a self-defeating state of mind. Oh, I am a mistake because I make mistakes, and that's the trap. You think you are what you do, but you are not what you do. You are who you are, and that's God's child. You are loved. Number 11 is you daydream, potentially. Now, I love a couple more. 12 is you have trouble getting organized. Number 13, you have forgetfulness. Number 14, you have multiple. Well, 14 is sort of like all of the above, or a multiple combination of the 13 tics. Now, here's the good thing. I heard Dr. Peterson, what's his name? Dr. Jordan Peterson say this yesterday on one of his videos. He says, when it comes to labels, yes, it might be a self-fulfilling prophecy that we believe we are blank. We are ADHD, and that is all we are. And that's not a good thing. But when we do get diagnoses, it actually relieves us many times because, oh, I'm not crazy. A lot of other people have the same problem. That's the good thing about these diagnoses, is that it helps us realize we're not an anomaly. We're very much like others who suffer. And if they can overcome these challenges or find a way to adjust to the reality of having this diagnosis, then I can too. I'm not a horrible person. I'm not a mistake. So what an awesome thing it is to realize why your brain works the way it does. But now it's your responsibility to harness it and to control and to have some self-discipline. You know, ADD or ADHD is not a curable diagnosis. There is no cure for it. There are some medications that you can take to help regulate your ups and downs and your frustration tolerance, but it's a Band-Aid, it's not the cure. And also having a diagnosis helps those around you understand, well, you are the way you are, not because you choose to be that way, but rather because this is the way your brain is wired. So that kind of relieves them. They don't demonize you. But ultimately, the responsibility to change and to learn to live with your speech impediment, Carla, and with your mental challenges is to really hit it head on and say, there's a lot of successful people that have ADHD, and a lot of successful people who have speech impediments, and I'm going to be one of those successful people. I'm just going to have to learn how to adjust to this disability. Carla, you may not know this, but my wife is quadriplegic. She's paralyzed. And because she's paralyzed, she's had to adjust to that reality. Imagine if she laid in that hospital bed once she found out she was paralyzed and said, no, I'm not paralyzed. Imagine if she stayed home in a bed and she says, I must walk. She would go crazy. She would actually develop mental illness. But she's adjusted to the sad reality of her paralysis, and she says, well, I'm going to be thankful for the movement I do have. And I'm going to simply adjust, learn how to use a wheelchair, learn how to wait on other people, learn how to receive help from other people. And when I married her, you know what my number one problem was? I had a lot of problems. But one of my number one problems when I married Jill was my need to be approved by others started to creep into our marriage. And when people were waiting on us to get through a door because they were opening it, or to transfer from her chair to an airplane seat because it was just taking too long and there was a long line behind me, I would get frustrated. And I remember Jill looking at me early on in our marriage, and she said, you know what, you're going to have to learn that people don't mind waiting. And if they do mind waiting, it's just too bad. I'm disabled and things take me longer. And I really had to do mental work on my mind to get rid of my approval addiction, so that I wouldn't be so irritable when people were waiting on us. And you may have to figure out the same thing, Carla. Thank you for writing me, by the way. And when people, I have friends who have slow speech impediments, and I've learned to be patient with them. A lot of times people want to finish their sentences, but that is just frustrating for the person trying to communicate. And you know what? You're just going to have to teach others how to interact with you. A lot of the research, I was working with the University of Mississippi, and one of the professors there in the speech pathology department, speech and hearing pathology department, says one of the great ways to mitigate the suffering from a speech impediment or a hearing impediment is to inform or disclose to the people that you're talking with that you have this issue. And what that does is it helps create in them that biological empathy that hopefully is in them. It's in most people. And they will have more patience. That's what you need to do. Disclose your challenges, and other people will have the margin to hang in there. A quick story before I go to a little commercial here is we were at Disney World, and I was waiting to help my wife into the restroom, and there was a door that was locked. You know those disabled restrooms? They got the male, they got the female, then they got like this family/disability restroom. So I was waiting, and the person finally came out, and I was about to push Jill in, and this cleaner at Disney World rushed into the restroom. And I was immediately offended. Like, doesn't he know we've been waiting here for a long time? And he's a worker. He could clean after my wife is out. And then I just irritatingly waited for this dude. He finally came out, and he saw on my face that I was upset. And I shouldn't have been, but I was. Okay? I took offense for my wife. Well, he immediately reached in his pocket. He drew out a card, and it said, and he repeated the words on the card. He says, "I have autism. I'm doing the best I can. Have a magical day." I took the card and was reading along as he was saying it, and it had a little picture of Mickey Mouse. And all of a sudden, my compassion, my empathy started to show itself. And I said, "Well, you're doing a good job, buddy. Thank you for cleaning the restroom." And Jill went in, and she shut the door, and I talked to this guy afterwards, and I said, "Hey man, good job for you. Disclosing what your challenge is, so that might give you margin of empathy with the people that you are speaking with." Give me a call, brooksgibbslive.com, or I'm just going to keep talking because that's what I do for a living. Give me a call. I want to hear about your challenging situation or how you're passing the time on Coronation. brooksgibbslive.com. You can video call me right now in studio. Lines are open. If you haven't heard about my homeschool, everybody say, "Don't get upset." I love my job. I get to help teach students how to get someone to stop being mean. I teach students how to systematically remove mean people from their life legally without any violence. There are 3 reasons why people are mean to you. You can see on the emojis behind me that maybe they're trying to be funny, and you're the butt of the joke. They're being mean to you because they want you to get upset. And always, when it comes to humor, someone has to be the butt of the joke. And when you're the butt of the joke, maybe you're not liking that. But the second reason why someone might be mean to you is because they're hurt by you. You did something or said something, and now they're angry with you. They have the desire for revenge. You realize you've got a victim you're dealing with. Maybe the third reason why people are mean to you is because they like to control you. They love to see you suffer. They want to have psychological power over you, and they love doing that. But the same truth for all 3 is don't get upset. Be emotionally resilient. Everybody say resilience. If you're emotionally resilient, if you're mentally tough, if you're cognitively strong, if you have emotional intelligence to know why she's being mean and how to stop her, then she cannot mess with you. Welcome back to Brooks Gibbs Live. Thank you so much for tuning in on Facebook and YouTube. I'm Brooks Gibbs, and I'm taking your calls at brooksgibbslive.com. Behind me is the awesome painting my son did. I'm so proud of you, buddy. It's called Reflections. Actually, it's over here. I'm on a green screen, so I don't know what the heck it is. There it is. So he's got a beautiful little ocean sign. He's got birds going through the air. He's got a moon being reflected. He's got the sunshine. I asked my son, "Will you please help me have something on my background?" He's so talented with his art. We just bought him an iPad for his 13th birthday, and he's got one of these Apple pens that he could color stuff in and draw stuff in. I'm very excited to see what he does as he continues to, and we continue to invest in his gifts and his talents. The old proverb says, train up your child in the way that he should go. And I think the best translation is in his way, in the unique way that is just for him. I'm going to read a comment from Danica Taylor. She wrote 28 minutes ago. Sorry, Danica, I'm just getting to this. Our wives or husbands, for that matter, I suppose, I'm not sure the context of that, how can families deal with the stress of being at home? For more context, we are not dealing with this ourselves. I think that your strategies could be great, though, for people in general to learn the skills to help with a more positive environment and or to know when it's time to call for help, when it's past bullying or something a child can handle themselves. And she also says, domestic violence is up 33% here. I wonder if besides the regular info, would you have advice for kids dealing with domestic violence? Yes, I would like to speak about this for a second. This whole pandemic of the coronavirus and the stay-at-home executive orders that have been passed by government entities have a unintended negative consequence. Many children go to school to get away from their dysfunctional household. And when you close down schools, you are essentially making those children stay in the very dysfunctional home that they're in. Not only that, but a huge number of students are on free and reduced lunch, meaning they go to school in the morning early to have a school breakfast, and then they have lunch at school. And that is probably, for many of those kids, the only meals that they'll have all day. So when you take away that resource, you take away their sustenance. The American family, just like any family or any around the world, can be healthy, but a huge amount are dysfunctional because they've got moms and dads who have serious problems, and sometimes they're just single moms or single dads that have to work, and they're just not there. So you'll have the abuse in the form of neglect, where they're not being cared for, or you'll have abuse in the form of physical or sexual, or she said domestic violence. And for those kids that are struggling, I just want to say, you're loved. God sees you. He sees every tear that you cry. There's a great verse that I took comfort in growing up. He says, he collects your tears in a bottle. Isn't that an incredible thought? Not a tear falls down. So just know that you have a heavenly Father, a God, a maker, a divine good that really does care about you. And he hears every prayer that you pray. And when you don't have someone to talk to, he's listening and he's always there. And you say, well, that's not good enough right now because my dad lost his job and now he's angry and he's drinking more than ever. And it's true. This whole pandemic, forcing people at home, has been a petri dish for all the vices. For those who are clean and not and sober for years, this is really testing them to maybe break that vow of sobriety. This is really going to be testing them. And some people have broken that vow and they have relapsed. And so here's what I say to kids who come up afterwards, my assemblies, they come up after me. What do I do when I'm being physically beaten by my father? What do I do when I'm being screamed at and yelled at abusively by my parent? Well, of course, I would love to say, get out of there. But do you realize that that's just not possible for some of these kids? I would love to say, like I did one child who came up to me. He was a young man. He was probably a freshman in high school. And he says, my father beats me and my mother. I said, well, you and your mom need to go to one of these battered shelter places. And he looked at me with tears in his eyes and he said, no, we need the money. My dad's our source of money. I said, well, they'll provide for you. They'll provide a house, food. You don't have to stay in that environment. My mom will not leave, he says. She won't let him call the cops. And even when cops are called often by the children, the wife defends the husband. So we need to look at a different psychology. I like Frankl from Man's Search for Meaning. He was being tortured in a Nazi concentration camp, and he disciplined his mind to be able to find purpose for his pain. And that's essentially what I teach children. When they have no choice but to be faced with the reality of domestic violence and abuse, I say, you lay low. You stay out of your mom's way, out of your dad's way. You do not be a source of trouble in any way, shape, or form. Do not argue. I clearly want you to call the cops. I want that person to be put in prison, but I understand if that is not going to happen for 100 different reasons, then the best thing you can do is avoidance. That's practical. Now let's talk psychological. There is a disassociation that needs to take place. To be disassociated with someone means I don't identify with you or your behavior. Parents and children are so associated. They are so intertwined. Their identities are wrapped together. But in an abusive situation, what a child has to do, and the little young ones can figure this out real quick, you have to disassociate. And you must become two people. What do I mean by that? When you're around the abuser, you have to take on a different persona. It's going to be hard for some of you who are listening to me right now. But this is the sad reality that children are in all over the world. In fact, I would call your name something different. So if your name is, let's say, Stephen, when you're around the abuser, your name is now Steve. And you have to ask yourself, how does Steve act? Steve is quiet. Steve is calm. Steve doesn't cause problems. Steve does not share his opinion. Steve does not give himself permission to contribute in conversation or to argue or defend. Steve is just compliant and a non-source of conflict. Just no problems. But when you're Stephen, your true self, who you really are, when you're around your friends, you're lively and bubbly and you're vivacious and you're opinionated and you're hilarious and you're taking risks. Part of the disassociation process for abuse victims is to be able to really become two people. You know where this happens the most? In 50-50 split divorce visitation scenarios. You know, just because school is closed doesn't mean the visitation rights have stopped. Those are still going on, and kids are still now full-time with the parent that they perhaps hate. Will become two people. Disassociate from that individual. Realize that the problem is not yours, it's theirs. And the third thing I would say, the first being don't cause any problems. The second, become a different person when you're around them. Take on a new persona, even change your name. Don't tell them to call you by that new name. Just tell yourself. This is all internal work. But the third thing is what Viktor Frankl from Man's Search for Meaning did. Envision in your mind purpose for this pain. That how could you someday use this pain or this exposure to this type of abuse for psychological growth in the future, for helping others? There's another verse in ancient scripture that says, may the God of comfort comfort you in your trials so that you may one day comfort others with the same comfort you receive from God. It's that same concept. Your pain can be leveraged into purpose. And when I was a child going through challenges, I envisioned myself actually as a psychologist, helping other children get through divorce situations. 11, 12, 13, 14 years old. I remember this girl, Katie, asked me, what do you want to do when you grow up? I'm like, I don't know, be an actor. She says, no, what's like a legit role? And I said, well, you know what I always thought? I thought maybe a psychologist. You know, now I am a school psychologist. That's my master's degree level, a school psychology. And I am helping kids with the same tools that I once helped. So it's not just pie in the sky theory. This is truly how you help yourself. Number one, don't cause problems. Number two, disassociate yourself from the abuser by taking on a persona that even has a different name, and you keep that internally. You don't externally share that, you keep that internally. And when you're around the abuser, you behave very strictly so that you are not to exasperate the abuse. And number 3, awaken your imagination to envision the purpose to the pain that you have. That not one tear that falls from your eye will be wasted, and not one moment of pain and sorrow will be forgotten, but it will be put to great use as you learn to be an incredible resource for others. That's my advice. Thank you for that question. You know something? It reminds me of this question I received from a child while I was doing a school assembly earlier this year. They said, "When did you start speaking? When did you start speaking?" And the answer, when I was 8 years old. Listen to my comment to this group of kids. What was the first thing I said the first time I was on stage? You mean the first time in my career? Yeah. I was in 2nd grade the first time I spoke on stage. And I don't remember my first words. But it's interesting, the very first thing I ever said, I went to this little private school, and I just told a story about a guy whose name was Job, but he's actually Job. And he had all these bad things happen to him, and yet he still kept a smile on his face. That was the very first thing I ever said publicly. And this great old story, it's the oldest story I think around. And all his kids died, and all his crops failed, and all his stuff was robbed. And yet he said, "You know what? I'm not going to stay sad. I'm not going to be depressed. I'm going to lift my head up high, and I'm going to press on." And he ended up rebuilding his life, and it was double better than anything he had ever had previously. That was the first thing I ever said. And since then, I've spoken 2,500 times to 2 million students face to face. I have over 250 million video views online, and I'm still speaking the very same message of resilience. And I started it in 2nd grade. Isn't that cool? What was the first thing I said the first time I was on stage? Well, it looped on accident. Hey guys, Brooks Gibbs here back. Thank you so much for tuning in. BrooksGibbsLive.com is the number or the website you go to in order to interact with me. BrooksGibbsLive.com. You can call and be into the studio right here, and we'll be chatting up. That was a clip from a question that was asked about when did I start speaking. And interesting, my very first speech, as I said there in the clip, was about a guy who suffered. Yet he still pressed on. His name was Job, and he's in Scripture. You know, he was a man of faith. I couldn't talk about my faith in a public school setting, but here on my own Facebook page, I can expand a little bit about that. One of the things that Job said was, "The Lord gives and the Lord takes away, but blessed be the name of the Lord." And you know, people of faith are at an advantage because they believe that they have a good God, a God that's good, and that nothing lives or dies outside of His sovereign control. And when you believe that, that's why it's called faith. You believe that. And the way you believe that is by reading Scripture, because it says nothing but that. Scripture talks about how good God is and how He can take something horrible and make it good. What the enemy intends for evil, He turns around for good. So faith is such a critical tool in our psychological toolbox to use to help heal the wounds that we have in our heart when we're rejected by people, when bad things happen, when tragedies are confronting us. Faith is incredible. In fact, it pleases God. Without faith, it's impossible to please God. It stands to reason with faith He is pleased, because that's our way of giving back to Him. He's given us so much. What we can give to Him in our free will is our faith. Okay, even though I don't see, I still believe. Hey, that sounds like a movie. I Still Believe. Have you downloaded or streamed that movie yet? I Still Believe, featuring Jeremy Camp. I encourage you to do so. Jeremy's a friend of mine, and I love that guy. And it's essentially about this. I do have a caller that's coming in. If you guys want to call me at brooksgibbslive.com. Hey there. What's your name?
George.
George. Well, you look like my 10-year-old son, Jackson. Is that you?
No.
Oh, no? So you must be Jorge then. That's your Hispanic name?
No, it's George.
Oh, it's George. Okay. George?
So we have a friend. Well, I have a friend who's very annoying, and I have a question, and I don't want to hurt that person's feelings. How do I stop them from being annoying?
They're only annoying if you're annoyable. Do you know what that means?
Not really.
That means if you don't find their behavior annoying, they're not annoying. But because you find their behavior annoying, you are annoyed. The issue may not be their behavior, the issue may be how you are so irritable you can't stand to be around them. Give me an example of how George is being annoying, and I'll tell you if you have a reasonable case.
What should I say?
Say what you want.
It's just she's kind of a little rude to everyone.
She's kind of a little rude to everyone, so everyone's like tired of her.
How is she? Yeah.
What?
Rude is another one of those words that are subjective, meaning what one person thinks is a compliment, another person might take that as an offense or rude. But I'll take your word for it. I won't try to split hairs here. Let's say she is rude and she's negative and she says things that are inappropriate. Is she a friend that you want to keep?
No.
Well, then I wouldn't bother correcting her. I would just let her be her. You only correct friends that you want to keep.
But one thing is she goes to our youth group, so we have to see her every Wednesday.
Okay. Well, when that happens, just realize that's how she is. And you're not surprised. In fact, you could kind of say, I bet she's going to be rude today. And I wonder how many times she's going to be rude. Now, don't be rude back. You know that, right? What will happen if you are rude back?
She'd probably be even more mean.
Oh, yeah. She'll be even, because she's going to try to dominate you and be more rude. And you probably would win because you're very sharp and savvy and funny, and you could be ruder back and you don't even care if she's rude to you. You shouldn't care. But that's not the way you'd want to be treated. And rather, you'd actually be nice. Here's an experiment. I wonder if you can cure her of her meanness or rudeness by being kind to her. What would you be against being kind to her?
No.
How could you be kind? What would you compliment her? Would you say something?
Probably compliment her. Bring someone to church.
Bring someone to church, you said?
I'm bring someone to the youth group. Someone, like one of her friends.
Okay. Okay. Well, that's certainly a good idea. You know, usually there's two phases to deal with a rude person. Number one, you start saying, I'm going to get a point every time they're rude to me. And that's like your quick fix. And so the next time you interact with them next Wednesday, you see how many points you can get. And you do that for about 3 weeks. But don't be rude back. Just see how many times they're organically rude to you and see how many points you get. That way you have sort of an idea. And then you switch the game on yourself and you say, now I'm going to give myself a point if she's kind to me. And what you'll realize is the only way she's going to not be rude to you but kind to you is if you initiate kindness first. And then that's when you start controlling her. So it's kind of like stop the bleeding by going to a point system to say how many times is she going to be rude, and then cure the wound or heal the wound by seeing how many times you can get her to be nice to you. And that's by initiating niceness. And you got to go armed. You got to go every Wednesday to youth group saying, I'm going to say, hi, how are you? It's so good to see you. Would you like to play this game right before the program starts? Stuff like that. And then you give yourself points. Have you ever done anything like this before?
Twice, but not really.
Not really? Okay, I want you to try it. Try it. Anything else?
Nope.
Well, I appreciate you calling.
Thank you, Mr. Brooks.
You're welcome. Don't call me Mr. Brooks. That's a movie about a serial killer. Okay.
Oh. Okay. Bye.
No, you can call me Mr. Brooks. You can call me. That's actually my son, ladies and gentlemen. That was Jackson Gibbs calling me. He realized poor old dad had no calls coming into this Brooks Gibbs live show, so he called me. That was very cool of him. Thank you, Jackson, for calling me. He said his name was George. That was nothing but a lie, folks. And that person he's talking about is actually a real situation. He does have someone that he finds annoying, that he interacts with regularly. So you guys got to see me give my own son advice right here on the show. Well, I'm going to end it early if I don't have any more calls. I want to thank you so much for joining this edition, a Tuesday edition, on our Corona adventure, Brooks Gibbs Live. Every day I'm here Monday through Friday, 11 a.m., brooksgibbslive.com. And I want to thank my son again for this awesome painting that he did. He entitled Reflections. I think that's a beautiful thing. God bless you guys. I wish you the best. Hang in there.